Hello and welcome to my talk on the ILI Cloud Curriculum. My name is Fergus Fadden and I'm the Director of Studies and the Director of Teacher Training with the International Language Institute, or ILI. So over the next few minutes I'm just going to give you an introductory talk which will be familiar to you if you've seen my talk in person, or hopefully it will help to give you an idea of our new product. Okay, so to start things off, I'm first of all going to stop my video, and I want you to think about a student. Let's call this student Jose. Okay, and Jose is a farmer, and farmers today, one of the greatest routes for them to move forward is through organic farming. And through the idea of organic farming, we can see a parallel with what we want to do with our cloud curriculum. Organic farming is reactive to the environment in which it exists. It's sustainable and it is appropriate to its context. These ideas are similar in our cloud curriculum. We want to have a sustainable curriculum, one which doesn't need to change only every 6 years, one which is not rigid, one which is responsive to the context in which the student is learning, and one which is responsive to the student's needs and learning styles. So how can we best achieve this? Well, we can best achieve this through the communicative approach. This is an approach which we use already in our teaching throughout the world. And the communicative approach at its core seeks to exploit the information gap, i.e. a gap in the knowledge between one communicator and the other, or one interlocutor and the other in the context of speaking. Taking advantage of this, we can devise activities which are real life and communicative. So instead of asking a person what color hair they have, well, they don't need to answer that question because I can see them by looking at their hair. So I'm going to ask them a question which is related to some aspect of their daily lives. For example, I might set up a dialogue or a role play where they have to ask each other for directions on the street. Something as simple as that, working with a map as a handout activity. Something as simple as that provides a real and relatable communicative activity which the learners can then take and apply in their real lives. This is what we want to achieve at all points. Now, how can we best achieve this? Well, we can, as we see this image here, this our most advanced means of communication, standing on the shoulders of giants, as it were. We can achieve communication all over the world in nanoseconds, and the same. We want to take advantage of the communicative technology that is out there, not just to make it a toy which is nice and looks cool in the classroom but has no real outcome. We want to achieve something through the effective and principled use of technology. Now, we know that if some students are at this corner of the earth and other students are at this corner of the earth, and we at ILI are all the way up here in Canada, that, not all students are going to be able to make it where we are at. So, to take advantage of the old saying, well, if Mohammed won't go to the mountain, then we must bring the beautiful mountains of Canada to him. It's maybe not Mohammed in this case, but Jose in this case. And what we really mean by that is we're going to bring our curriculum to them, to the student. And we're not only going to bring it to them, to their country, we're going to bring it to where their attention is at. So again, thinking about Jose is in his home country, and yeah, maybe he can't leave because of family commitments, work commitments, study commitments, all sorts of commitments, or maybe simply just monetary commitments or his economic situation. Also, where is his attention point a lot of the day? Well, his attention point is, like most of us in 2015, is through some sort of connected device. right? His smartphone, his tablet, etc. And this has a further implication as well. If we think about in the classroom as well, how many of us teachers struggle with the students who don't fully pay attention, the students who, the students who are sending messages on WhatsApp or on Facebook, and we struggle to get their attention sometimes. We demand their attention, but really what we need to do is not struggle with them, but to work with them and go to where they're at. So instead of getting their eyes to look at us up on the board, why don't we get our materials to where their eyes are at? And then we remove the point of conflict, and then we start to see more superior outcomes for the student. So presenting our materials through the tablet, etc., is going to help us work better. So people often say that learning is like a challenge that needs to be surmounted, and challenges are always better achieved together, right? A load shared is a load lightened. So we try to employ a learning partnership. Now we do this through many facets. I'll speak about this a little more a little later, but the principal way in which we seek to achieve this is through what we call the flipped classroom. The flipped classroom takes classroom work and puts it at home, and homework it puts it into the class, and this promotes more peer learning and peer teaching. So it's not just the teacher as the only fountain of knowledge. In that case, going from that point, as I said, the teacher is not the only fountain of knowledge, and the teacher is not the only driving force towards the learning outcome. In fact, all students and teachers are involved in the process, and everybody is helping to move towards the learning outcome. So then in the end, what we want to try and achieve is this melding or this mix of organic and digital, so that the organic, the real sustainable learning is what we see the most of. But then, we can see that the digital has its place to help us achieve that. However, it's not the focus of our attention. Look at where Jose and his employees' attention are focused on. It's focused on real life. We want to make technology invisible. Just as the pen is technology, but it's invisible to us. We don't focus on how new and wonderful the pen is because it's second nature to us. The same with technology. We want it to be second nature so that we focus on the first nature, on reality itself, and how we use language in our day-to-day lives. So lessons from the classroom is, we took this image of one of our students to demonstrate this idea that not that textbooks have no place in the classroom. In fact, very far from it. Textbooks definitely do have place in our classroom and place in our teachers' lives. However, it's not where our attention's principal focus point is at. And if we try to struggle with that, we're going to lose our learners' attention, and we struggle to motivate them. The main point here is the motivation of the learners. If we can help to make their motivation intrinsic and respond to what they see as true learning for themselves, then we're going to achieve better outcomes. So I spoke a little bit before about the flipped classroom. We can see results from the flipped classroom is that students become empowered and therefore more engaged. So what do I mean by empowered and engaged? Well, we can see here that, okay, maybe this person could be the learner, or this person could be the teacher, or vice versa, but everybody is involved in the process. There is no one person who is necessarily taking a submissive learner role and a dominant teacher role. We can see here the person who is probably the teacher is looking in an engaged way as the learner explains something to not only the teacher but the group, and then everybody becomes involved and engaged. How do we achieve this? Well, if I make a presentation of language at home, let's say I want to present the present perfect grammar, so subject, auxiliary verb and past participle. So I present that in class and I present the meaning, form and pronunciation of that. If I'm teaching a group, I'm going to get most of the group and I'm going to get most of the rest of them with my concept checking questions, etc. But still, some learners just might get it a little faster than others. So if I can set up a situation where it's not only me being the person clarifying here, but a situation where learners themselves are helping each other to achieve mastery before they move on to practice and production of the language, then this is an ideal situation. How can I do that? Well, I can create a presentation of language for homework, and the students can watch that and move at their own pace, and then they can rewind it, or they can skip through it and do a practice exercise at home. And through this practice exercise at home, I can see how much the learners have understood or have not understood, and then I can focus on what I need to focus on in class. I can even make classroom management decisions, such as who I pair together. I pair a person who's really got it with a person who's struggling, so that peer learning can happen, etc. So it creates a very empowered and engaged learnership. Returning to the idea of motivation, we can see that when we can involve our own creativity and personalize our work, not just in learning, but all areas of human endeavor, that the motivation increases. So, as I mentioned before, technology now, yes, we want to make it invisible because we're not so concerned about the nuts and bolts, but more the outcomes of the technology itself. So technology today is maturing in such a way that it's allowing us to express our creative side. There are a million apps for simply creating music, for simply creating blogs, for simply creating art, for simply creating podcasts. All of the apps are doing the back end work for us, allowing us to access our creativity and present materials in a way which comes more from the inner self, again, heightening the student involvement and motivation. This leads us then to where we see our cloud curriculum creating an advance in methodology. The methodology which is, or within methodology, one of the ideas which has governed language teaching for the last number of decades has been the student-centered approach. And we are very much proponents of the student-centered approach. However, at ILI, we don't want to rest on our laurels. We don't want to always stay the same. We always want to try and push boundaries and see where they're going in a principled way. So the way that we see all of this technology going, and this very student-focused approach, this peer learning, peer teaching, flipped classroom, etc. This is bringing us from a student-centered environment to a student-led environment. So with the creative elements that the technology is allowing us to achieve, by placing more responsibility in the students' hands, we can begin to see that the students are beginning to suggest the direction and the pace of the learning. For example, imagine that I set up a speaking activity using a podcast application, for example, a podcast application called Audioboom. And everybody uses that and makes their own little 2-3 minute podcast, and it's great and it's excellent. But then one of my students comes to class the next day and he says, "Okay, Fergus, that's okay, but have you heard about this other application called VoiceThread? VoiceThread allows you to create an asynchronous conversation where everybody's involved, and you can put videos and photos and text, and it's much more dynamic." So then the student can be involved in suggesting the evolution of the curriculum itself. Again, helping the learner to feel more involved and responsible for the direction of their own learning, not just a passive proponent of the learning itself. The technology itself as well allows the learning to be collaborative, interactive, simply through, our base platform is Google Drive, and everything about Google Drive is collaborative. People work on text documents with a number of students all working on the same document together at the same time. The documents are interactive and dynamic in that they have links and videos, and they're not just static pieces of paper anymore. We're taking advantage of where media and technology are allowing us to go. All of this leads towards superior student outcomes. Mastery really is what we mean by this. No longer is it, okay, you have one opportunity to get what is going on in class. Now you have multiple self-guided opportunities through the flipped classroom, through watching videos, peer learning, peer teaching, teacher working as a mentor, as a guide, etc., to achieve high levels rather than just mediocre levels and then moving on to the next part in the learning. So thank you for watching. This has been a pleasure to have your attention for these few minutes. We believe that through the use of the ILI Cloud curriculum, you're going to have the best opportunity to achieve these higher, superior student outcomes. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.